Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 8 of Anchor Stories. You guys know our goal here is to inform, inspire, and to build a strong community of fatherhood. I'm your host, Troy Woods, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Rolling Stones. Now, we're also going to be recording this to put up on our YouTube channel and our social media feed, so you guys can get this information no matter where you're located. But listen, this episode was actually inspired by a good friend of mine. I call him Uncle Ron. I know he's going to be listening to this. But we had a conversation the other day. Actually, it's probably been a couple of weeks now. He called me. I forget where I was in the city. And we were just talking and just sharing some things. He knows about our Missing Anchor initiative. And we started talking about, parents just not being there, or parents just being, I don't want to say estranged, but when you find out as a youngster that your parental situation may not may not be as you thought it had been your whole life. A lot of times men get the bad rap on that, and through our conversation, we found out that, we do have some women, some ladies who have done the same thing in regards to their family. And the bottom line is it still affects the children. You know what I mean? And we're talking about when you find out when you get older, and I'll use myself as an example because I think I can clarify things a little bit more by just, speaking on my situation. For those that don't know, I grew up, I want to say a single mom, but I watched my mom go through a couple of marriages, and, my stepfather, I lived overseas in Guam for about 4 years. My stepfather was in the military, and when I came back, when we came back, actually the family came back, my parents, my mom and my stepfather, they separated in a divorce. It seemed like almost immediately when we came back. And I think the challenge for me in this whole situation was, my stepfather actually adopted me, so I took on his last name. So, my brothers and I have different names, different last names. And so, for me, I think it hurt a little bit because we had built a bond, especially over those 4 years when we were away overseas. And when we came back, it just seemed like it ended. Now, being my mom was strong. And, with my older brothers already being grown and moved out of the house, it was just me and my mom. And so I instantly felt that I had to take on the role of being the man in the house. And, of course, I was young. I wasn't working or anything like that. But I've always had like this emotional trigger or mechanism where when things happen, especially if I kind of see some things coming, and I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but I have a tendency to kind of shut off emotions towards certain things. So, I saw my mom was hurt. I saw she was going through, and I just kind of closed off. I kind of closed things off towards him. And so, life just kind of went on, and they went through their situation, eventually divorced. Everything was finalized. And so we just went on with life. My mom did the best she could, private school. I'm not going to say she struggled, but I know sometimes she gave her last for it, and I'll be forever grateful for that. But the turning point with me came, and this is kind of where we're getting to the topic of this podcast. The turning point for me came when I reached adulthood, and I think I was around the age of 24. And I was having a conversation with my one of my older brothers, and I can't remember if it was a heated conversation, but all I know is some information came out in that conversation that really kind of rocked my world at the time. And basically, I'm not going to get into the details of everything that was said in that conversation, but it led me to have a conversation with my mother in regards to who my father was. And initially my mom was upset because it was something that she said she wanted to share with me for a long time. She was just waiting for the right time or the right moment to do so. And she told me the truth, and the gentleman that I thought was my biological father wasn't. And the unfortunate thing with that is, and I'm pulling out something right now. Of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you won't be able to see this. But the unfortunate thing about this whole situation is, when I found out this information, my biological father had already passed. And I want to say he passed within, what we have here. He had passed a while ago, and he had passed a while prior to this conversation. And so, of course, I was upset, and of course, in being upset, I had a lot of questions. And so, for those of you that can see this, recently, I'm going through some of my mother's items and cleaning up and going through some things. I have a lot of her stuff stored here at my house. And my mom always kept a lot of things. And I was like, why are you keeping all of this stuff? I'm like, are you a pack rat? What's going on? She always just kept a lot of things. One of the things that she kept, and I'm going to talk about this on future podcasts, was she kept a lot of photographs. So I have a ton of family history here that I'm going to go through and share with my family. But she had this thing of, and this is really weird to me anyway, when a family member would pass, she would always keep the program from the funeral service. And, and I would see the stuff, and, I've never done good with that kind of stuff. So again, especially when, and I've been working on it, when I found out a family member may be transitioning, I think I just kind of mentally and emotionally already start preparing myself for it. But just here, 2 days ago, I was going through some information, going through some of her paperwork, and I came upon that stack of programs from funeral services. And like I said, for those that are listening, you won't be able to see this, but if you're viewing the video of this, I'm showing it right now. I came across the program. Oops, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put the name out there. Sorry about that. I came across the program. I'm not going to show the whole thing here. I came across the program from the funeral service from my biological father, and it was really weird. When I saw it, actually Kelly was down there in the basement with me, and I didn't even say anything. I just walked over and said, "Here," and gave it to her. And she was like, "Is this your dad?" And then, of course, she's like, "Oh, you have his nose, you have this." And I'm like, she was asking me questions, and then she started reading what was inside of it. And I said, "Hey, look for this particular name, look for that particular name." And she said, "Yeah, I see that person's name in here." And so we kind of had a conversation about it. But, guys, it really got me thinking, like, man, this is probably the best picture that I have of him. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, there's so many questions that I have. And now that was kind of a long way around to get to the topic of this podcast, which we call Rolling Stones. And we've heard the song, Papa was a Rolling Stone. But guys, I mean, just frankly, sometimes Mama was a Rolling Stone. And through the conversations that I have, especially, like I said, I call him my Uncle Ron. We were just kind of sharing some things about the wake that children are left in when things like that happen, and the questions that often people have that go unanswered really your whole life. Now, I'll be 100% transparent with you guys on here. I have a sister, and I have been struggling with this for years on if I'm going to reach out. I know some people may be listening to this or viewing this and say, "Yo, Troy, you should really go ahead and do that." But here's where I am with the situation. Of course, my biological father was the family friend that we knew about. I do remember him being around, but of course, I didn't really know him in the capacity of father. And so when I found out everything and found out the truth behind it, it left me, of course, with a lot of questions. I knew that he had I knew he had a daughter. And so, I should reach out. But the one thing that's held me off from this is I don't know what type of legacy he left to other members of his family. And when someone transitioned, especially, because he passed, fairly at a young age. I'm not gonna say young, but he definitely wasn't up in age when he passed. And so I just didn't want to step in and say, hey, I'm your brother, and then it just opened up a whole nother not can of worms, but just a whole different situation. I know, and I can treasure memories, and I know how other people treasure memories, and I just didn't want to be that person that just kind of rock somebody's world with that information, especially this late in the game. We're talking about he passed in like 96. So, it's been quite a long time since that happened. We're looking at 20 years, 21 years. And so I just didn't want to be that person that bought that type of information. So that leads me to, this topic. How do we deal with that as children? How should we deal with that as parents? Like I said before, we're going to keep things real here with this podcast. Anchor Stories is about, just providing information and insight. But I think they're both sides of the coins. They're two sides of the coin that we need to look at. We need to look at this from the perspective of a child, and we need to look at this from the perspective of a parent. As a child, should you reach out? Should you, and I think it really depends on when the child finds out, because a child can be 8 and a child can be 38. And when I don't mean child as far as behavior, I just mean, they're children of someone. And so I really think when it comes down to it, you have to get into, all right, is this something that I really want to, if I'm younger, of course, if you're younger, you have a chance to really grow into this and kind of just learn and possibly forge some type of relationship with your parent. If you're older, man, there's a chance that, you have your own family, you've moved on, you're married. And so now you're really introducing a whole different scenario or dynamic to all the families involved, because now you're looking at about 3 families if you do this. So I think it's a very interesting topic, something that I know we won't tackle everything here, but something that, I do believe we'll address as we go on over time. I'm going to be honest and say, if you are a parent, and I will say this from a parental aspect, you need to reach out to your children. One of the things that upset me the most is that as my father, he never reached out. I always felt that he put, and I know him and my mom, they talked about, revealing this information to me, when to do it. I think maybe he wanted to do it, but the timing didn't seem right and different things like that. So I totally get it. But we're talking about this from the perspective of a father, from the perspective of a man. It is your obligation, because the child never asked to come here, and you were 50% involved with that child being born. As a man, I believe it's your obligation to do everything that you can to make your presence known in the life of that child. Even if you've moved on, you have another family, and I understand it can be difficult. That's just, I'm not going to say the chance you have to take, but that's more so the cross you have to bear. Because one of the things that we see too often are children, especially male children, that are out here just floating around with no blueprint. They don't have any source of origin. They're out here making it up as they go along, or doing what they feel best, getting it from the barbershop, getting it from wherever. Everybody makes mistakes. No one is perfect. And sometimes, many times, your mistakes can really teach a valuable lesson, not only to yourself, but to your children. And I think it's very important that you're transparent with them, that you let them know, hey, look, this is what I did. Because if not, your child will grow up thinking that they're a mistake, or that you're somehow disappointed or ashamed of them. And many times that's not the case, but I think the lines or the communication bridge not being there. And a lot of times this happens when a child is younger, and then as that child progresses or grows into adulthood, you really don't know how to have that conversation then, because they started gaining their own life experiences and they just been going on with life. And now you're coming at them. They're, in the case of a man child, you're a man, they're a man, and they've developed their personalities, and so you really just don't know where to start. I truly, honestly believe that a lot of times these conversations and these relationships aren't mended because the parents, the fathers, they just don't know where to begin. There's no comfortable way to do that. There's no comfortable way to make that introduction after years of either you being gone out of that person's life or that child's life, or you just never being present at all. There's never a comfortable way to make that introduction, but the introduction needs to be made. So I just want to encourage all men, all fathers out there, if you're in a situation where you do have a child and you're not in that child's life, even if everything seems to be going well, even if somehow you have a way to keep tabs or to know what your child is doing, nothing will replace your presence in that child's life. Like I said on previous podcasts and just in talk in general about what we're doing here at the Missing Anchor, I know a lot of times children are used as pawns in relationships. A lot of times mothers will use children as pawns because many times the mothers are the one that get custody of the children. And a lot of times they will use children as leverage. You can't see your child. I need more money. I need this. I know there are a lot of games that are played when it comes to children. But what I want to encourage all the fathers out there to do is to keep fighting, keep pushing, because your impact in the life of the child you'll never really know the impact that you'll have until that child gets older and goes into adulthood. And it's at that point that I think you'll really be able to see the fruits of your labor. So again, guys, stay encouraged. Do what you need to do. Stay active in the life of your child. You guys know that is our creed around here. Our goal is to help fathers, father figures, stepfathers to either remain active in the lives of the children or to get active in the lives of the children. That's what we're here to do, as well as focus on, our health. Just focus on our overall development as fathers. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. This has been episode 8 of Anchor Stories. We entitled this one Rolling Stones. And we said that, it could be, even though we're all about men and fathers here, Rolling Stone could be a father, it could be a mother, but it's all about that parent being active in the life of that child. Look here, we've also made a decision here in regards to our social media. You guys know, one of the things about being in this digital age that we're in now is we have so many options, and I've been struggling with, putting information on my personal accounts, putting information on the Missing Anchor account. So what we decided to do is really move and push forward with just documenting everything. Because, on my personal accounts, I share a lot about fatherhood and time that I spend with my children. But it's getting to be a bit too much to have it spread out across these different platforms. So what I want you guys to do is make sure that you guys are following the Missing Anchor accounts. You can find us on Instagram at The Missing Anchor. You can find us on Facebook at The Missing Anchor. Our website is themissinganchor.com. So look for us on those platforms. What we're going to do is I'm just going to start documenting my life as a father, different things that I experience, and we're going to cover everything on there. Business, family, what I truly think it takes. If you're a father and you want to be active in the life of your children, I know I didn't take the traditional route. And so I'm going to be sharing some things with you all just as an option, because my goal through all of this has just been to be active in the life of my children. So I'm going to be sharing that on our channels. I definitely want to reach out to you guys. Let's connect on all of our social media platforms. So again, you can find us at The Missing Anchor. That's on Facebook. That's on Instagram. And as well as our website, themissinganchor.com. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Until the next episode, take care. God bless.